But the thing is, my question was, your due diligence process now is completely different when you just got in. Like, what made you decide that I want to fund this deal apart from me and the credibility and all that stuff? What was that deciding factor? I'm excited though.
Me too.
I get to interview Colin. Normally, he's always the one
No,
picking
it's
my
been like a
brain.
year. Kalisha has been asking
Oh,
me for a year, pretty much.
Colin, it's literally a year because we started
Yeah.
in last
August
August.
4th was our first deal.
Wow. Happy
Yep,
belated anniversary. Oh my gosh.
that's right.
Date. He remembers a date.
He remembers it.
Yep.
Wasn't it the 16th?
No, it was the 4th. It we connected on the before that, and then I joined Gator on the 1st, and then we got the notes done on the 4th, and then we funded on the 8th. I think
Dang.
something like that. Yep.
Wow.
Oh,
We've
I
known
see
each
some
other
cool
a
names in here. It's pretty exciting. Hey, Kiola. Good seeing you.
year. That is all the whole year.
Yep.
So it feels like it's been like less than 6 months.
Yes.
It's
A
like
year ago, I probably wouldn't. I don't even have a camera, so and a mic.
it's crazy because now like Colin does so many videos and he would text me and I'm talking like like after 12, after midnight. He's like, I hate recording videos. Do I need to record videos? What should I say? And like now he's like, he got the equipment, he's recording videos nonstop. I'm like, dude, oh,
I still have, and I have my other recording here too.
see? Oh. He's like a pro now. Like, oh my gosh.
About the content, right, Kiola? He knows. I know Kalisha already knows. So
Go. You got to do the content, man. Like I was supposed to record some videos today of case studies, like breaking down deals that I've done, and I was supposed to record those maybe like 3 weeks ago. And every time I'm like, I am not in the mood, and I turn the camera on, I'm like, I am not in the mood to record these, but I have to record them because, like, even though I have them in a pitch deck, my team is like, we need to put those in a video. You need to break those down. I was like, do I really have to do that? Like, you guys see me, I don't like doing videos. Like,
Nobody does.
no, I don't at all. Not at all. So in 2 more minutes, we're going to start as well. If you guys are like, I'm just that type of person. I don't care how you look, like if you look like a mess, but I love seeing faces. At least when I see the name, I can put a face to it because I've seen that Rory name before, but I can't remember the face. Like I've seen a lot of familiar names, so I was like matching a face to it. So, that's how
yeah,
people
faces are
remember you.
important.
Yeah.
Faces are important for sure. Because I can't remember names, but I can remember faces better.
Yeah. Didn't make it. Jackie,
Hi, Kalisha. How are you?
Hi,
I'm good.
Jackie.
How are
Hey,
you?
Colin.
Jackie.
Excited for you guys to talk.
Man, and it's crazy, guys. Like, I have some questions from persons that shared with us in school. I have questions of my own, which I know the answer to, but if you guys have questions, like drop them in the chat, raise your hand, stuff like that. No question is what do you call it? Too
There are no
dumb.
stupid
Oh,
questions. No
ask
stupid
the stupid
questions.
questions. No, ask it. Because then you might think that it's a stupid question, but someone else has the same question, but they're afraid of asking it. I know a lot of persons here are already in or school group, the free group as well, and some is in the mastery, which is the one-on-one call, the one-on-one sessions that we do. These Zooms are usually every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and it's all about raising capital, structuring deals. So Colin actually, no, is Colin our second guest that we have here. A couple weeks ago, we had a title company with us going through stuff with due diligence as it relates to things you should look out for as a capital raiser, as a connector, going through documents. And then if we don't have a guest here, I'm just here every Wednesday. People can like literally pick my brain. We get that all the time. Hey, can I pick your brain? How do I structure this deal? So I literally sit here for an hour, hour and a half. Persons come in and just ask questions. That is like my way of giving back instead of doing a bunch of like one-on-one calls. If you're not in school, we're gonna drop the link in the chat, so you guys can join. It's free. If you have questions too, like it's the perfect place for you to go in and be like, all right, I'm stuck with this structuring this deal. Let me see if anyone within Kalisha's group or Kalisha can help. I'm on school like a couple times during the day. So someone asks a question, I'm either there giving the answer, like typing it out, or if I know it's something that's too long, I'll record a video and give that response to it as well. So definitely check that out. Not a bunch of fluff there too. So it's like straight substance and stuff like that. So we're gonna get right into it because it's like 7:06. And it just feels amazing. I need to pin everyone here. Like I'm doing this. Like I get to pick Colin's brain. Normally Colin will be picking my brain, but now I get to pick his brain and just to see the progress of just the progress is insane of what you've done over a year. And a lot of persons know you through Gator, a lot of persons know you through Sub 2. What I really want to like get back into was when we first met. I remember Colin found me on Facebook and he was like, hey, I did some research on you. I would like to invest with you, all that stuff. And I remember I said, hey, like, let's see if we're a good fit. Let's fill out this form because I want to get to know who you are. I didn't know who he was. This person just literally messaged me like, hey, I want to invest with you. I have money. I was like, wait, what? So for me, I took a step back because I'm like, if you start throwing money at me like that, I'm like, you're not a real PML. So I sent him a form and I was like, hey, like, can you just fill out this intake form so I can get a better idea of what you're looking for? And then that way we can set up a meeting. Got in the meeting, guys. I've never met someone who is such a freaking risk taker. And you know, people talk about low risk taker and medium and high. Colin is like a high risk taker. I think he's the type of person where if I make up my mind that I'm gonna do something, I'm just gonna go in and just do it and
Just do it.
get it done. Like,
Right.
how did you get to that point?
Well, I was sitting on the sidelines watching everybody do stuff, right? And I've been absorbing. I stumbled upon Bigger Pockets and in like 2023 October, and I was just doing other books, doing all the David Green's books and doing all the audiobooks and Rich Dad Poor Dad and all that fun stuff. And then I first stumbled upon Pace, and I was like, oh, okay. I watched all his videos, all his YouTube videos, every single video I did the 24-hour thing video that he did on like 3x speed, right? And I stayed there. I was, everywhere I had my headphones in. Wife wasn't too happy about it, but just kept going, right? And then I decided to join Gator, right? But before I joined Gator, I reached out to Kalisha because I was actually going into the free Facebook group. I was typing in PML, private money lender. I was typing in, and every time I type in private money, Kalisha's face would pop up, right? And then I was like, who is this Kalisha lady? And, I watched the content. The content was key because that actually got me to find out who Kalisha was and what she was doing and, the things that she was talking, the topics and all that, right? So I jumped into Gator, and I was like, okay, I was hitting up Kalisha and I was like, hey, let's talk. And then I got into Gator, and she wasn't in Gator, but I ended up, connecting with her before I jumped in and just took action, right? I was sitting on the sidelines for a while, almost 10 months, just absorbing. And then one day I was like, just do it. I got into Gator and that's how it started, right?
Yeah.
I think our first deal was 138,000 or something like that.
Which it's crazy too, because so I want to address two things, because a lot of times persons like, hey, I just want to get my first deal. And I always tell a person like, you will never be 100% ready, ever. Like when I started investing, I got to a point where I'm like, I'm done listening to podcasts. I'm done reading books. I think I was at analysis paralysis. I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to just dive in. That's the only way I'm going to learn. And when I did my first deal, like nothing went according to what the book said, like nothing. I had to create my own process. And I think when we met, even though you're like, hey, I have X amount of money to invest, I had to be like, I could have said, give it all to me. And I mentioned to him, I was like, hey, let's start off with this amount and then we're going to split it up so we can manage your risk and we can like navigate things a little bit. So I think we had a deal here in Tampa, and he funded one deal on Friday. And Colin was like, once we're funded, we close. He's like, wait, when's the next one? I'm ready. I'm like, dude, hold on. It's not even like 24 hours and you're ready to fund the second deal. And best believe he funded another deal by the Tuesday. And it also goes to show like he was ready. But the thing is, my question was, your due diligence process now is completely different when you just got in. Like, what made you decide that I want to fund this deal apart from me and the credibility and all that stuff? What was that deciding factor?
Yeah, so I think part of it was, so that was, I haven't done private money lending to that, a degree. And what was the key factor there was understanding the process through you, Kalisha, because I was I work in quality. I work in quality for a pharmaceutical company, right? So I'm the quality director, and my job in my W-2 is to release product to the hospitals, the clinics, cancer drugs, right? And my signature is on the line when I'm signing off documents and releasing product. Now, I take the same kind of approach where I say, if I'm going to sign a document, I need to understand thoroughly what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. I may not understand all the legal mumbo jumbo in majority of the documents, but I can at least read through it and understand the raw basics of what it means, right? And I was asking Kalisha questions after questions. We would go back and forth for hours and hours. It wasn't like, hey, here's my money. It was, I'm ready to go, but I need to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I need you to walk me through the process. I need to really vision and see the big picture on how this is going to go down.
Yeah.
Right. And understand that risk. Now, if you're going to do a PML deal for the first time, do not do it alone if you don't understand it. Right. It's so important to actually work with somebody that has done it before. Now, if you're working with connector that hasn't lended money before, find someone that you can bounce it off with, right? Someone else that can walk you through the process, because any one of us that has done a deal before, we will walk you through the process. We would take a look at it and say, hey, these numbers actually don't work. I actually helped somebody. I saved somebody from losing like 200 grand the other day. They were going to go in, and before they even funded, they're like, oh, I'm going to fund this deal. I'm like, can you take a look at the numbers for me? I'm like, before you even go in, you're underwater, right? And they had no exit plan. They just like, oh yeah, I just, the numbers look good. But it wasn't the numbers look good. It was the return that looked good.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because as especially new lenders as well, they go in just see the return and they don't know what a good deal looks like. So even for you, like, I know return wasn't yes, it's a big thing, but for you, it's really like, how can I pull my money out? What were some of the factors you looked into to make sure, okay, this was a solid deal for me to invest in? Not like now, but back then, what were some of those things that made you decide that?
Yeah, so I needed to meet the borrowers, right? We got on the call with the borrowers. We spoke to them, and they knew what they were talking about. I understood their kind of thought and their approach to how they were going to do the flips. And they made it clear that they understood the market and the area that they're flipping, which was important.
Yeah.
And then what I did next was I Facebook creeped the hell out the borrowers, right? I was going on all their Instagram. I was going on their Facebook page. I was looking up their names. I was Googling their names and Googling the LLCs and doing everything I could to actually check all my boxes that made me feel comfortable about moving forward.
Yeah.
Then I would say, hey, Kalisha, what about this? Is that the guy? And then I would go through and talk to Kalisha about, tell me more about these guys. And Kalisha would tell me, okay, I know these guys because, we hang out a lot. I meet them there in my certain groups. I've done deals with them and whatnot, right? So the key piece for me since the beginning has been focus on not just the deal, but the operator.
Yeah.
Focus on the jockey before the horse,
Mhm.
right? Because that's super important. You can do a 40% return deal, but if your borrower's not communicating with you, it's done.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not gonna get your money back, right? I have Kalisha that I could bounce things off, and she was my boots on the ground. I would say, "Hey, how are things going?" And she would send me pictures. She would say, "Hey, I spoke to the guy this day," and that communication is so important when you're doing a deal because especially if you're doing your first deal, you want to get in there. You don't want to sweat. And let me tell you this, right? When I was doing my first deal with Kalisha and waiting for my first monthly payment because I had a monthly payment.
He was freaking out.
I was freaking out. Okay. I was sweating. My wife was like, "Are you sure you're going to get your money back? Are you sure you're going to get your first month pay?" And I was like, 12 midnight. Why is it not through yet? Right. I'm like, the bank's not open yet. Hello. Right. But it was the sweating, the nervousness. And then when the money hit the account, I was like, I can breathe. Right. It's actually real. Proof of concept. Right. But to get to that point, I needed someone to walk me through the deal. I needed someone to explain the whole process. Now, I didn't say, "Hey, what is just a deal?" But I made Kalisha talk me through the entire process from the start to the end before I did the deal.
Yeah.
Like, what's
Multiple
going to
times
happen?
too.
Right. Say
Yeah.
that again.
I said multiple times too.
Multiple times.
Mhm.
I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And what happens when the deal's done? How do I get paid my principal back?
Yeah.
She'll tell me about a payout statement, how things will flow, how my funds will be returned to me, and so on and so forth, right? So that made me understand the entire picture of from start to end and how I will get my money back and the risk involved. And I say, what happens if they don't sell the place? Right? Then she's talking to me about refi. What is a refi? What does that involve?
Yeah.
Right. And she'll walk me through that process.
And it's for that too, like even though when you got to the point of, okay, now I'm going to fund this, the next question was, all right, Colin, where are the funds coming from? Because at this point now, we're also working with a timeline. And a lot of times as capital raisers, as connectors, there's a fear of asking, where's your money coming from? Nothing is wrong with that because now you need to set the expectation. If funds are coming from a personal savings, that's a quick bank transfer. If it's coming from your self-directed IRA, that's a whole different timeline. And then your custodian is going to require like the documents to be structured in a certain way. Line of credit is going to take some time. For that deal, can you tell us where the funds came from?
Yeah, absolutely. So the funds that I did for that first deal was through my HELOC.
Mhm.
For those that don't know what HELOC is, a home equity line of credit. I basically pulled out money from my house. So I paid most of my house down over the last couple of years. I actually bought my house or built my house creatively and had a bunch of equity right off the bat. Right. So I had about 600,000 in my house. I pulled out about 480. So I had it ready to go. And it's a line of credit. A HELOC is a line of credit. So imagine a credit card on your house. You don't pay until you use it.
Mhm.
So if you guys have equity in your house, I would recommend doing a HELOC anyway.
Yeah.
It's for emergency money.
Mhm.
Whenever you need it, you don't have to pay anything. If you don't use it, it doesn't cost anything to apply for it and get it. It's a
Yeah.
line of credit on your equity of your house. So I've been having a HELOC for like 10 years. It's just emergency money just in case something happens.
Yeah. And then
Right.
with your HELOC too, because this is something, and this is where like I always tell persons like with PML, like I like working with PML who's like, hey, we're gonna build a long-term relationship. This is not a one-off deal. So now I know that Colin uses his HELOC. We keep in communication. What is your rate that you're getting for your HELOC? And whenever his rate changes, he let me know because let's say, for example, if his rate is 9% on his HELOC, it's pointless for him to loan on something at 10, 11% because then he'll be losing. So what I want you to touch on, Colin, is when it comes on to HELOC and how do you decide like what deals to go with based on the rate that you have? How do you keep track? Like I know this, but keep track of, all right, I had 200,000 my HELOC. I already pull out 100,000. How am I going to manage my risk to make sure it gets paid back on time too?
Right. So what I do for my HELOC is every time I use a funding source that has holding cost. So my HELOC has a 7.5% interest. When I started, it was 2% and then 6%, But when I started lending, it was I think it was 5 or 6 last year when we started.
Yeah.
So 5% annualized. So I was doing a deal for 6 months, right? So if I did a deal for 6 months, it was 5% annualized. That means at 6 months, it would be 2.5%. So what I did was I calculated my 5%, what that 5% annually I would be paying for interest. I divided it by 12 to see what my monthly holding cost is going to be. Then I said to Kalisha, hey, this is my monthly holding cost. If the borrower can cover my holding cost plus a little bit for fluctuation because it's a variable interest rate, then I'm not coming out of pocket every month and hope that you get my money back.
Yeah.
I'm relying on my borrower to pay me so I can pay my holding cost. So I'm not coming out any money. I'm using my interest. Right? Part of my interest is coming out. Now I'm not taking all the interest and dividing it by 6, right? Because I want the borrower to win too, because that's the only way you're going to get your money back. Everybody needs to win, all right, in the transaction.
Yeah.
Right. If you take a little bit out to cover myself, I win. You still give the borrower more than enough to finish the job, then he wins as well.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because like when Colin mentioned about holding costs, it wasn't like, I don't think he knew that borrowers can pay holding costs. He's like, hey, do you think that they'll be open to paying my holding costs? And I was like, I don't know. We can ask. The worst they can say is no. So you got to know, especially from the lending side, is that any question that comes up, ask it. Better you ask the question. If they say no, then that's fine. If they're like, if you really need it, you're like, okay, how can I compromise? Can I ask them to pay half of it? Like the worst they can say is no. And as connectors as well, we got to be okay, like asking that question to the borrower. Don't assume that the borrower is going to say no, because most times we don't know what the borrower's operating capital is. Like they would rather pay than not have the money at all. And then with that too, like what I kind of like touching on the, what do you call this? Like the personal side of things, because for some of us, we're doing this investing full time. For you, which I always think that you're crazy, but I don't know how you do it. Colin has a full-time W-2 job. When I'm working, so some of you know I'm a night, so I work perfect after 12 a.m. So I remember the first time he messaged me and I was responding back. He's like, wait, don't you sleep? Why are you up? I'm like, why are you up? Colin would go to work. He's crazy job during the day. I know when it hits like 11, sometimes up to 2, 3, we're both up texting back and forth. Like, how do you manage that? And you have 2 kids and a wife, and then still out there finding deals to fund. Like, how are you handling all of that?
Sacrifice.
What are you
There's some
sacrificing?
sacrifices you have to make, right, in order to succeed.
Yeah.
Nothing is ever going to be easy, right? But when you have that determination to succeed, and when there's that drive that I have, right? So it goes, there's a different path when you have something that you're trying to achieve and you know where you want to go, right? My wife is a stay-at-home mom. I have a full-time W-2 job. I get up at like 5:30, something like that. I go to bed at like 2, right? And then I'm having 5 calls a day, right? I skip my lunches. I have 2 calls during my lunch, 1 call in the morning, 1 call afternoon. After this podcast, I have another call somebody on the West Coast, right? But I try to, whatever time I have to meet and network with somebody, that's what I'm trying to do, right? But when I'm doing my lending, when I first started, my time was not networking with like so many people. It was more so educating myself, trying to understand processes, trying to find people like you to help me walk me through the process so that I could learn at the same time. Because you can read and educate yourself as much as possible, but the most effective way is to do it with somebody and actually go through the process. So, my recommendation, and this is my opinion, is don't go out and do a 40% return deal, right? Go out, test the water, do a lower risk, lower return, get your feet wet, understand the process, understand the documents, really nail down what you need to do. Then you build your risk up slowly, right? If you're not a risk taker like me, but if you are like, hey, I want to start, but I don't know, I'm afraid, right? Don't start with like 138,000 like me, but you can start a little bit, right? And test the water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Get the documents,
Okay.
understand the process.
And
But yeah, going back to your question is, I do it because I know what I need to do in order to succeed. I sacrifice my time. I let my wife know this is for the next 2 years, this is what I'm going to achieve.
she's so
It's
supportive.
going to be so worth it,
Yeah.
right? If you can do that, then, I mean, I run 5 departments, right? For my job, I run 5 departments. I'm, it's a full-time job,
Yeah.
meetings all day, right?
What I know is that when you started even transitioning after you lend some of my deals, like now we started partnering. Whereas I would have deals now and he's like, hey, wait, I just saw your email. Hold up. I have someone who wants to fund it. So now we became partners where and it was automatic. It wasn't like, oh, we need to put in a contract. I think it was way after we decided we need to do a JV agreement, but it was like, hey, we built that relationship so quickly where he was like, you have the deal, you have the pitch deck. I already know you went through your due diligence. I have someone, and Colin would now talk to someone within his circle, explain the deal to them, and then bring them to that entire deal. And we would like split the finder's fee. So we will make bank. Like we were doing deals. I remember like in December, like I think we were closed like 6 deals right under, because we were like, we have to close before 2024.
Yeah.
And we were like back and forth. I think we ended up out of the 6 deals, we closed 4 in like 2 to 3 days, and 2 kind of flowed over into 2024. But that time, I think we were doing so much volume. And the thing is too with that is like, Colin would ask so much questions, and sometimes I'm gonna be like, I hate that he has the quality control the quality background. But guess what I've learned is that some things I would miss and Colin would see it and save my ass, especially on the paperwork side of things. Like I'm always doing a lot and he understands that. So he's like, Kalisha, I know you're doing a lot, but this is what I see. I was like, oh snap, I missed this, or I forgot to do this. So I like that he has that background. And when you're partnered with someone like Colin, you have to realize that it's a good thing. It's a really good thing for someone to tell you, hey, you missed this, and you have to be able to accept that, because he's looking out for you. He's looking out for your business reputation, your relationship, the transaction that you're doing. And oh my God, I had this solid question. So I'm leading into your due diligence process right now, because I know of what we've done. Like your due diligence process now is completely different than when we started. Talk about that when you're vetting a borrower, when you're even connecting a borrower with one of your lenders. What does that due diligence process looks like?
Yeah, so before I even reach out to any lenders on a deal, I'm already working on a due diligence packet with the borrower, right? So the first thing I do is I ask the question whether they're open to a background credit check, because that will give you a quick, is there anything they're gonna hide?
Yeah. Who pays for that?
Right. Typically the borrower will pay for it.
Okay.
Right. I will give them a heads up and I say it's going to cost you $44, right, to do a background credit check. Now, and then they'll say, is it a hard pull? Because I don't want a hard pull. And I tell them, nope, it's a soft pull background check just to see. And a credit history is more important to me than the credit score, unless you're refining,
Okay.
right? So it depends on the exit strategy as well. And part of the due diligence piece that I do is, first of all, I get on a Zoom call with them and make them turn on their camera, right? Because what the next step I will do is, can I have your license, pictures of your license, so I can match up their face with their license,
Okay.
right? To know who they are. right? And then we get the LLC docs. If they're using LLC docs, we get the LLC docs, the operating agreement, make sure that if there are any partners in the deal, you want to make sure that, we are speaking to the key players, right? Because there's been a couple of instances where they say that they're borrowers, but somebody else's name is on the documents.
Yeah.
And they're using a sponsor because their credit is not so great. Right. So you want to make sure you're dealing with the people that are actually signing the documents. Right. A lot of people I've done deals with, they show up on camera, but they're not the people signing. So you have to be aware of that. Right. Do the sniff test, do the license, do the LLC's information. And then what I do is I check the LLCs on the Secretary of State, make sure that they are active, make sure that they have been, doing business. If they say they've been doing business, do that. Verify the status. There's been a time where I think I told Jade and Molly on one of my Zooms is, we're about to close and we found out that the LLC was not in good standing because of some taxes. Right. So you want to make sure you always do that check before you close, before you fund. And I do that for my lenders as a connector. I pull the LLC status right the same week that we are going to close. Right. Just to make sure that they.
With a good standing, for those who don't know, can you tell us what does that mean? Like, what is that document that they're looking on to verify that LLC is in good standing?
Yeah. So you can actually go to the Secretary of State to where the LLC is created. You can just type in, New Hampshire Secretary of State. I'm in New Hampshire. Secretary of State, you go in there, they will say, okay, you want to search by LLC. You can search the LLC, and then it will come up with a status on when it was created, who owns it, what their registered agents are, and then whether they're in good standing or not. So if they're not in good standing, they'll tell you why. So maybe it's a tax issue, maybe it's tax year, and in that situation it was a tax year, and they haven't paid their taxes yet, so their LLC switched over, or maybe they dissolved the LLC, right, and it's inactive. So you want to make sure that you don't want to use that LLC, right, that is not active. So that is part of the due diligence check I have, and my due diligence checklist, mind you, continues to grow because we are continuously learning about things, right? So every time I get on a Zoom with somebody and they tell me, this is my lesson, this is what I'm supposed to do, what I did wrong, well, you take that lesson and you put it into your system.
Yeah.
So you don't make that same mistake again.
With that too, like even with the due diligence process, like your due diligence process, guys, is not going to be perfect. Like as Colin said, like as you go through it, that's when you improve, because you have to make a mistake or learn to know what it is that you need to improve. Like when I just started working with Colin, he never asked for background check and credit check and nothing like that. We didn't even collect photo ID because we've created that trust. And I knew who I personally knew who those operators were. So I could have vouched for those operators. But now, if I've never worked with that operator before, I'm collecting the same info as Colin is collecting as well. So if we're working together on a deal, I can say, hey, I already have everything. Here's the Google Drive. You go do your due diligence, as I know you would, and let me know if you need anything else at all, right? And Colin is not afraid to ask questions. Like he came in on the lending side, not on the investing side. And a lot of times as real estate investors, we assume that everyone understand the underwriting. Everyone understand the exit strategies and all that stuff. Our job is to, whoever is lending, be able to communicate it in such a way where a baby can understand what is it that you're doing. Don't give fluffs or anything like that. It sounds good that you make good returns, you get your money back, but have you had any case where lenders are late, and how did you handle that? Have you ever foreclosed on a property before?
Okay, so I have not foreclosed on a property before.
Yeah. I was gonna knock on wood.
Right. But a lot of the deals have been late. Right. So when we did our first deal, I was in the expectation that I'm gonna get my money back on this date that they said they're gonna give my money back. I got it back early, which is great. But then another one, they were a couple of days late, or I can't remember exactly what it was. But after doing so many deals, you start to see like, okay, this is real estate. And people always say that, right?
Yeah.
Shit happens, right? Things go late, permits, you got a city that takes a really long time, architects that take a really long time, title companies that took a really long time, right? And you as a lender, if you're going in as a lender or coming in as a lender, you have to set that expectation that, hey, this date is not a hard date.
Yeah.
It is a hard date on paper, but you have to have the mindset that it might most likely will go late.
Yeah.
So to prepare yourself for that when you're going to a lending deal, because every deal is different. Some days, some deals you get paid early. Some deals you have to extend because of XYZ,
Yeah.
right? I mean, contractors run off with the money. Now they got to start again. Maybe they got to raise a little bit more because something happened, right? We had tornadoes, right? Hurricanes, flooding.
Yeah.
They can't do a rehab when your basement is flooded, right? So you have to account for some of these, right? And you have to be flexible. I mean, you want everybody to win. You don't want to foreclose and take a year and then now everybody loses money and whatnot, right? So going with a mentality, even as a connector, right? Set that expectations if you're dealing with a new lender. The
Yeah.
new lender is going to be nervous. They're going to be uneasy. They're naturally going to be extra cautious and extra, but you have to set the expectation. Hey, if they need an extension, what do we do then, right? Should we predefine what an extension fee will look like?
Yeah.
Should we predefine what a late per day looks like? Right? And have that conversation up front so everybody knows that if I hit my due date and it's going to be late, I'm going to get an extra $2,000
Yeah.
or $1,500, right? Paid to me up front, right? Or however you negotiate. And then after that, it will be your late fees would kick in.
Okay.
But set that expectation, right? That it could go late because that's the nature of the business.
No, it's crazy
Right.
that you mentioned that too. Before I even ask another question, like guys, if you have questions, raise your hand. So that way we can get your question answered. If Colin or myself says something where like that's not making any sense, like can you clarify or go deeper into that? So feel free to raise your hand. If you're shy to raise your hand and talk, you can drop your questions in the chat. Colin, another question that I have is that FOMO. And I asked you this because I've been getting that question asked a lot, meaning, Kalisha, there's so much stuff happening. I feel like I'm missing out when I see pictures and videos posted, but I also need to focus on getting my first deal done or growing my business. Like, how do you handle FOMO, or do you even get FOMO?
I mean, I was FOMO from the start, I think. I mean, when I jumped in, I was like, I gotta get my first deal. And then I got my first deal pretty quickly, right? In Gator with you. I did a deal before Kalisha. But when I joined the community, that's when I did my first community deal, right? But the FOMO is real. I tell people to follow what Pace says, right? This is not a race. It's not a race to get your first deal because a lot of people have gotten the FOMO, haven't done the due diligence, jump into it because someone said it was a good deal, right? Don't look at the numbers and then don't know the process and get stuck.
Yeah.
Right. That's the worst, right? You would rather go into a deal that you feel secure, you feel confident. Don't go into the deal feel rushed, right? If you're going into a deal and you're feeling rushed, then you're going to be nervous for the rest of the duration.
And you're going to freak everyone else out.
You're going to be sweating. You're going to lose sleep. And I cannot lose sleep. I already don't sleep enough, right? So I cannot lose sleep in that sense. But going in there, feeling confident when you do a deal, like when I did the deal with Kalisha, if I was nervous, I wouldn't say to Kalisha, what's next? Right? I was so confident in the deal because I had someone walk me through the deal. I had someone show me the documents. I had someone explain to me how the process is going to be like.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So
not
don't ever feel
sugarcoated
rushed
too.
going into a deal.
Yeah. And as connectors in here and capital raisers in here, lenders like when you be upfront. Don't sugarcoat. Yes, we all know we all have a great deal, but I love starting a conversation with the worst can happen. Like, I want to set that expectation, like, hey, there's a 1% chance you're going to lose your money. Will you be okay? If I pick up as a lender that you're going to freak out and you're not comfortable, I don't want to do a deal with you because you're going to stress me out. You're going to stress the borrower out, and the whole deal is just going to be miserable. So I'd rather you walk away until you're comfortable enough to know that I know what, and I know what I'm getting myself into. I understand what I'm getting myself into. And that was it with Colin. Like, as much as he wasn't 100% ready, he had made up his mind that I'm going to lend her this money. And the only way for me to learn is just to start and ask questions. So that's why I mentioned, like, whether you're new or an expert, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't assume, even if you know the answer to it. Put things in writing. That is going to help a lot. Edgar, you had a question?
Hey, yes. Thank you, Kalisha. Thank you, Colin.
Hi.
Hi,
Hey,
Edgar.
I had a question. Hey, brother. I had a question about due diligence. I had some fix and flippers here in the Georgia market that were looking for a loan, but what was interesting is that they had two separate LLCs. And the guy was telling me, yeah, I have my partner and he has his own LLC. And I was curious, how do y'all approach that situation? Should there just be one LLC, or do I need to do background checks on both of them, or what are
Yeah.
y'all thoughts on that?
So in my opinion, I would see who's going to be on the documents. So if it's both LLCs on the documents, then yeah, I would definitely pull both for everything, right? You would do the same due diligence for both. But if it's only one LLC, then I would do the due diligence on one, but I also pull the operating agreement to see if there's any partners in the deal.
Yeah.
Right. And see what the partnership split is too, because that's important, right? Because if you think about it from a refi standpoint, if there are two partners in the deal, most refi lenders will look at the operating agreement and say, hey, I want to do background checks and credit checks on both partners.
Okay,
Yeah.
Right.
awesome.
So,
Appreciate it.
And another thing too, Edgar, is that because I've done it personally for my deals, you have to verify on the HUD who's carrying for that specific property, which LLC is going on the HUD. Is it both entity or just one? If it is just one entity, you want to make sure, like, there's a JV agreement. So whatever entity is going on the HUD, that's the entity that you're lending on, that lender is lending on. So if it's one entity, that means that particular entity will now be the borrower and going on the loan docs. And then you need the operating agreement to make sure whoever is signing is the one going on the loan docs. Now, title will also verify all of this because they cannot issue loan docs if it's not corresponding with which entity is going on the title.
Okay.
So if it's two, you got to make sure the two LLCs will be on the title. And then that way you need the operating agreement for both entities. And then if it's one entity that is carrying the loan, that's where you put, like, get a JV agreement. But if it's two entities going on the title, I need the two entities on the loan docs. They're both signing for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Colin as well, man. Thanks for what you do, brother.
yeah, absolutely.
I love
Thanks,
it.
Edgar.
What other questions you guys got? Like, I'm telling you, there's no right or wrong questions. Like, we're not here to soak up all the info. We're here to learn. But I'm sure you guys' brain is like going and you're like, I got a question, but I'm afraid to ask it. Or is I'm just gonna call on you.
Ham has a question.
Oh, hey, so I know that everything's negotiable, but what's kind of like the standard of who pays the connector fee, finder's fee, the borrower or the lender?
So
Well-
I look at it this way. It's the borrower. For me, it's the borrower. I need Kalisha as the borrower. But I look at it this way. If you're going to the bank and you're going to borrow from the bank, say you're going to take a loan from the bank, do you say, hey, bank, I'm going to borrow your money. Can you pay me a fee?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're not going to go to a bank and ask them to pay you a fee.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at it that way. I don't charge my lenders because they're giving their money. They're lending their money, right? So you're not really wanting to take, from them.
Yeah.
They may be borrowing, the borrower may be borrowing more, and the lender will be now loaning more money. They will get more interest from your connecting fee
Mhm.
that the loan amount is, and then the borrower is borrowing more money for your connecting fee, if that makes sense.
And then what is kind of, what do you guys see for a connector fee or you know, what do you guys say? 1 point, 2 points? Like, what are you guys looking at usually?
Depends on the deal.
Yeah.
Right?
It depends how you
Where's
structure
the
the
deal?
deal,
Yeah.
right? There's different ways of connector fees.
Mhm.
There's connector fees where you take it up on the upfront, where you close, you take a connector fee. There's connector fee where you take it on the back end, that you say, hey, I don't need a connector fee, but I want, 2 points of your profit,
Yeah.
right? Or there's a connector fee where you say, hey, maybe your borrower says, I'm going to, I'm okay doing 20%. And then you go to a lender and you say, hey, I have 15%. Then you can take that 5% and arbitrage. They call it arbitrage, right? You arbitrage the rate.
Mhm.
You can do that way too. Or you can do a hybrid. I've done a hybrid where I'm taking a small fee up front and then I'm taking equity on the back end.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
Right. So there's different ways of structuring it. Some connector fees, if your arbitraging is a little bit less, if it's a big deal, then I'm taking equity on the back end because then it's more on the back end,
Yeah.
right? If it's a multi-family deal, I say, hey, don't give me any connecting fee, give me equity in the deal. I want to be an owner of an 80 unit,
Yeah.
right? I will sacrifice, 20K connector fee for 5% equity of an 80 unit property,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? That's wealth, long-term wealth, right? But again, that's how I structure it based on the deal. So it really depends. I also look at it. I don't know how Kalisha does it. I kind of know how Kalisha does it, but for mine, I would say I will look at the deal and see how much the borrower is going to make, because you don't want to take a $2,000 connector fee if the borrower is going to make 10,
Yeah.
right? So you also have to make sure everybody wins in that case.
Mhm.
If the borrower is making $100,000, then maybe it's okay giving you 5 or 10, right? So it all depends on profits, all depends on a win-win-win situation that everybody wins in the deal.
Yeah. And it's crazy to him because like I've had borrowers who's like your connector fee is too expensive. But I've had borrowers who like, I know what value you're bringing to the table. I love volume. I don't have time to go raise capital. So I'll focus on finding deals, finishing my projects, go raise the money. I don't care whatever your fee is. So when it comes down to connector as well, I would say you'll find your people, and it is okay if you look to say, hey, I want to make this amount of money because of the time that it's going to take for me to do all this work. If they say no, sometimes it's okay to walk away, because then you might think like, all right, maybe they said they could only pay me $2,000, but guess what? You're down the line in a couple months from now. You're like, this deal was so much headache, so much stuff happened, or it was just a pain in the ass. Like I've had deals like that where just because the borrower didn't want to pay the high fee, I cut myself short and I just kept cussing myself out. But I couldn't blame the borrower because I was the one who cheated myself. I know how much work it will take to be in a connector. People think connecting is just, hey,
Email
borrower,
pushing.
lender. That's it. Like just one connection and that's it. It's a lot of work. You're providing a service. You're making it so much easier for someone who wants to earn passively. You're doing the legwork.
Yeah.
It takes so much time, especially if you're in the deal, until it's time for the lender to get their money back, whether it's 9 months down the road. You're in that deal for 9 months. So you have to really assess what will be worth my time, especially if you have other stuff that you could be doing to make twice or triple the money that you would pay with that connector fee as well.
Yeah, and remember some of the I don't use a TC because most TCs in a PML transaction is only coordinating with title, right?
Yeah.
They don't draft any of the documents. The title attorneys draft the documents. I draft the JV agreements, and the TC in this situation, in a PML situation, will just coordinate with title. Now that would be nice, but if
Yeah.
I'm making $1,000 or $2,000 connecting fee, and my TC is taking 1,000 or 1,200, right? Their standard fee. Then you're only making $800, right? And you're gonna put in like 40 hours or more, even from the due diligence checklist, from the time spent with speaking to the borrowers to the whole negotiation, and then I'm working with title. I'm doing all the transaction. Then I'm staying the deal for like a year or 6 months, and I'm doing all the legwork to make $800, right? So I'm doing all the TC work, right? So you have to also remember the value, because today somebody said to me, "You're taking like this amount of money for a connecting fee." And then he said, "You should just get a piece of pizza." He told me I should get a slice of pizza, and because I'm just doing like an email push as a connector. And I'm like, you obviously do not know how
Work.
much connecting, how much work goes into a connector, right? And he told me basically that I should get a piece of pizza.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm glad you brought up that TC thing too, because connectors are like transaction coordinators. Like you're the one communicating with title the entire time. Like you get a paperwork, you review it, you send it to your lender. Lender, hey, is this good? Do you have questions? Listen to all the concerns the lender has, clarify that, go back to title. Hey, can you fix all of this? Blah, blah. Okay, can you send the wire instructions? I think connectors are acting as TCs.
PCs, yeah. I mean, I just did a deal with him, right? And I essentially was walking him through all the documents, right? And reviewing the documents and showing her what to look out for when we're doing a deal. So as a connector, just remember, if you're dealing with new lenders, they don't know the process, right? So you have to walk them through the documents. You got to show them how to actually do the documents. And if you don't know how to do the documents, then maybe you should learn a little bit more, do a little bit more before you start connecting, because those are, people are putting their trust into your hands, their money into your hands when you're doing a connecting deal.
Yeah. What I want to ask you too, like this question just came to me was, as a connector, as a capital raiser, how do you explain the process to someone within your network? Let's say someone at work who you're trying to convince them to lend, they don't know anything about real estate. Like, how do you walk them through that process of it?
Yeah, so I use Vina Jetty's 3-second pitch.
What's that?
Right. That is, they say, "Hey, what do you do?" And they say, "Hey, I show people how to make double-digit returns secured by real estate. What about you?" And then they say, "I do this." And then they'll come back and say, "Wait, what did you say again? What did you do?"
Yeah.
And then I say, "Okay, before I tell you what I do, where do you save your money?" Right? I always say, "Where do you save your money?" Because what that helps is, what does Pace always say? Be a storyteller.
Yeah.
Right. So you can tell a story just straight off the bat, like say, "Okay, where do you save your money?" They'll say, "Hey, they say, when I save my money in a bank, it's always like 0.2%, right? Unless you have a high yield savings account and it's like 4%. Then they're like, yeah, 4%. Then I say, if you do a fixed CD, it's 5.25%. And I say to them, what if I told you that you could make 8% or double that? I say double that amount. What if I told you could double that amount? It's secured by real estate. Now it's not like a loan shark kind of deal, right? What do you think? And they were like, "Nah, that's a scam," right? And you're like, or they say, "Oh, this is crazy. No, 8%, no way." Or 10%, they're like, "No way." And then I would say, "Yeah, that's exactly what we do." Right? And that way, they can come in at 10%. That way, that they're excited about 10% or 8%. Then you can go to, "Hey, how do I show these new lenders how to get that 10, 12%?" Because to them, we're not talking about 20, 30% return. We're talking about good, solid returns, monthly interest payments only, right? For those longer term deals that you can put them on and they still make passive income.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how you bring folks into and capital raise, right? In my opinion, that's how so far I've been able to bring people outside to actually lend and show them what the different lending sources are, right? And how you can actually use different sources of money to actually lend.
It's crazy to hear you give that response now, because I remember when we started talking and I was telling you I'm still offering deals 12% at like 8 months, 9 months. You're like, where are you finding these people? And I'm like, Colin, like your true lender who's not in real estate will be happy getting a 12%. I've had lenders say no to 15% because they think that is too high risk for them. And
Right.
these are lenders that are in the industry that all they do is lend money and they're happy we getting 12% for 12 months. Like I can get those for my personal deals all day.
Right.
And they're happy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I still do 12% deals
Yeah.
because what I do if it depends on where your money is coming from. If I don't have a holding cost, I don't mind doing 12%.
Yeah.
But if my holding cost for my HELOC is 7.5%, I can't do 12%.
Yeah.
Right? I got to do more because it doesn't make sense to do 12% if I have a holding cost of 7.5%. So it has to really depend on where your income is coming, where your lending source is coming from. If you're lending from your 401k, so I lend from my 401k, I'm okay getting 10, 12% because I got no holding cost. And if I can get monthly income, I can't touch my 401k anyway.
Yeah.
So I can keep doing deals there, right? But people want the high return, high yields, and the constant. Then you got to think about where your funds are coming from. What kind of risk taker are you? Um, how many deals have you done? Are you comfortable with the deal, right? And it goes back to your FOMO. A lot of people jump in and I don't want to do my first deal. I got this money. I want to do high returns, and they jump in and then they get stuck,
No,
right?
it's crazy. I'm glad you mentioned that too. And even like if you're a lender here, you're thinking of lending or even approaching lenders as well, the goal is you want to work with someone the first time, but you want to continuously build that relationship and so they can reinvest. Because we've had deals with Colin where he would reinvest and we pay him out his interest. And he just reinvests because it depends where his source of funding is coming from. He's okay reinvesting and getting paid out his interest. So that's something as well that you guys have to consider. Colin, we have a question for you. What does the lender get out of the deal? David, can you clarify that question, please? In the meantime, we'll jump to Zane question. She said, do you have an underwriter that underwrites potential deals or do you do it yourself?
So when I work with Kalisha, she has an underwriter. She has Erin Garcia that underwrites all the deals, right? So her deals pushes to an underwriter. With my deals, I do the underwriting, and then my partner also does the underwriting. And then we say, hey, if the numbers are a little bit weird, like they don't make sense, or like they're a little bit tougher, then we send it to a third party underwriter. We pay the underwriter a fee to actually do that. So we used to pay our underwriter like maybe $400 or $500. They'll take a look at it. They'll look at the market. They look at this, and then they'll sanity check it for you. And guys, if you're connecting and you don't know how to underwrite yet, you pay an underwriter, right? Include that into your connector fee.
Yeah.
Right. Pay an underwriter. Go find an underwriter. So many of us that know how to underwrite PML deals. Right.
Yeah.
Pay them like $500 or whatever. I paid once. I paid like $800. But depends on the deal. If I'm getting a $10,000 connector fee, I wouldn't mind paying an $800 underwriting fee, right? So also depends. I'm not a multifamily capital raiser, so I don't underwrite multifamily. But if I do raise money for a multifamily, I would definitely have maybe even 2 underwriters.
Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah. If you guys need underwriting services too, like Aaron Garcia is in school in our community. So once you have a question, just drop it there and tag Aaron. And he does phenomenal underwriting. Like, oh my God, he's insane. He's really good. Edgar, what you got? We have time for one more question and then we'd have to wrap up because I know Colin has something else.
Hey, another quick question about keeping up like updates from your borrowers. I know that you could put a JV contract, right, and you ask the borrower for updates every 30 days and stuff like that. How, like, as a connector, I'm assuming y'all have a conversation, right, up front with the borrower, right? These are the expectations. This is where we need to be upfront on communication, because I think that's one important thing, right? As a lender, like, and putting other people's money to work, that communication has to be like high level, right?
Yeah.
How are you dealing with borrowers that don't communicate correctly? I guess that's my main question.
Yeah, so for me, I know Kalisha has a system that she runs through Monday. She gets notifications, but she also has that relationship with the people, right? The relationship is key, knowing who you're dealing with. And I talked about this at the start of this meeting. I mean, this Zoom, was that you need to go with the jockey before the horse, right? If you can build that relationship with the borrower, you know that he's going to be a good communicator. Because if you start off the relationship and this guy's not, you're trying to do the deal, he's not responsive. I had to shut a deal down because the deal was so good, but the jockey was just so bad. He would take like maybe more than 2 days to get back and stuff like that. He was so busy, and then there was no communication. I'm like, this is gonna be hell for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
By trying to like, he wants to do the deal, but he doesn't even have the urgency to do the. I have more urgency trying to do the deal than he does. Right?
Yeah.
That tells a story about whether he's gonna be a good communicator or not. So when you do a deal with somebody, make sure you vet the borrower in terms of that communication piece. But our JV agreement, Edgar, me and you did a recent deal as well, where that
Yeah.
JV agreement will list the roles and responsibilities and the requirements on how they would provide updates. But that's only on paper, right? That's on contract. But if they don't do it, it's really hard to enforce it. And what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do through a JV agreement, right? And that's why it's key to build that relationship with the borrower. That's key to make sure that the communication is good from the start. So if you're doing a connecting deal, if something feels off on the communication, it is likely going to be off throughout the whole deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
And
risk it.
Thanks for that tip, because I was dealing with the fix and flipper, and to your point, I asked him for document, he doesn't provide it. I'm like, man, if this is how it's gonna feel, like, yeah.
Pull it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to pull the deal,
Yeah.
because it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's not going to be worth it if the communication is not good from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Kalisha.
No, you're welcome. All right. It's 8:01. Colin, we did it.
Yeah.
Like we've been trying to do this interview since forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm super happy to be here. I got past my nervousness hearing my own voice, and my hairs don't stand as much anymore when I hear my voice. But yeah, I mean, it's good to be on Zooms. It's good to, I think this is my third like interview.
Yeah.
So I'm getting better.
You're getting better.
Right. I'm jumping on Zooms more. So if you guys, are trying to do the connecting and capital raising, content is important. Building your brand is important. Right. I made a lot of deals. I did a lot of deals just from the content itself.
Yeah.
Right. People reaching out to me from Instagram, from Canada, for example, and doing deals that they saw me on Instagram. Right. So it's so important because everybody's on their phones. Right. Everybody's scrolling. Right. So it's important to do that.
No, I'm so happy that we got to do this, and just hearing things from the perspective of someone who didn't have a real estate background, who jumped straight into the lending side of things, then pivot into doing a connecting, like you're dealing with the money, and just to hear that perspective, it's amazing. And I've talked about it a lot of times on a lot of our Zooms, but it's always good to hear it from the actual lender. So you guys can see what lenders are out there looking for you. So you're prepared as a capital raiser, you're prepared as a connector, knowing what questions to ask and knowing what's out there in the market. So I appreciate you for coming on, doing this Zoom, and I'm sure a ton of persons found value. Thank you guys for staying on, having your cameras on. Like y'all were super attentive. Like I was looking at some person's like faces, and I was like, y'all are so engaged. But I love it. We meet here again every Wednesday. If you're not in school, I dropped the link in the chat, so make sure you're there. That's the perfect place for you to get access to me, not Facebook. Because I know some people be like, hey, I messaged you on Facebook. I'm sorry, most times I don't even see it because there's a lot. But if you're on school, that's where you can like really get in touch and stay tuned. But thank you guys for showing up, and I'll see you guys next week, Wednesday. And thanks, Colin.
Thank you for having me. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.